Stand at the gates of Mar-a-Lago today. The mansion gleams behind palm trees and security fences. Gold paint catches the Florida sun. Secret Service agents watch from posts along the perimeter. The building stretches 126 rooms across 17 acres from the Atlantic Ocean to the inland waterway. Tourists stop on the public beach to photograph it. Members pay $500,000 just to join. The initiation fee alone could pay for a comfortable home in most American cities. Now, ask a different question. Who built this palace? 600 workers poured concrete, carved stone, and installed 36,000 antique tiles across 4 years in the 1920s. Most of them were black men and recent immigrants. They worked 12-hour days in Florida heat. Some fell from scaffolding, others collapsed from exhaustion. When the mansion opened in 1927, their names appeared nowhere, not on plaques, not in newspapers, not in the official records that celebrated Marjorie Merriweather Post, the serial heiress who commissioned the estate. The workers who built Mar-a-Lago never walked through its front doors again. How does a private club become evidence in a federal investigation? How does a party venue end up at the center of classified document scandals? How does one building connect labor exploitation in the 1920s to political corruption in the 2020s? Mar-a-Lago is not just a mansion, it is a mirror. Look closely and you see how American wealth actually operates. You see who builds, who profits, and who pays when things fall apart. You see laws written to protect property rather than people. You see beauty created through exploitation. You see a system where breaking the rules carries no real consequences if you have enough money and the right last name. This investigation follows the money. It names the workers. It reads the documents the government tried to retrieve. It examines a century of decisions that turned 17 acres of Florida sand into one of the most controversial properties in the country. The story begins not with marble and gold, but with an island that was designed from the beginning to keep certain people out.
Palm Beach did not happen by accident. The island was engineered as a winter paradise for white millionaires, and everyone else would serve them or stay away. Henry Flagler arrived in 1893. He had made his fortune as John D. Rockefeller's partner in Standard Oil. Flagler was 63 years old and looking for his next project. He saw a narrow barrier island off the Florida coast, mostly empty except for a few settlers and a lot of mosquitoes. The climate was perfect. Warm winters, ocean breezes, enough distance from the mainland to feel exclusive. Flagler bought land and started building. The Royal Poinciana Hotel opened in February 1894. It was the largest wooden structure in the world at the time, with 1,100 rooms. Flagler built his own railroad to bring wealthy guests directly from New York without making them travel through rough Florida wilderness. Rich families could step off private rail cars straight into luxury. The hotel catered exclusively to white Protestant elites. Jews were not welcome. Black Americans could work there but not stay as guests. But all those hotel guests needed servants. They needed cooks, maids, groundskeepers, and drivers. Flagler solved this problem by creating a second city. He founded West Palm Beach on the mainland specifically as a support community for the island. Black workers would live there, shops and services would operate there. Everything required to maintain the fantasy of effortless luxury across the water would be tucked out of sight. The separation was enforced by law and violence. Black workers had to carry permits to be on Palm Beach. They were required to leave the island by 6 o'clock each evening. Police checkpoints controlled the bridges. A community called the Sticks had existed on Palm Beach, where black workers lived in small houses near the water. Flagler's developers forced them out. The land was cleared, the Sticks disappeared. Former residents moved to West Palm Beach or left the area entirely. Sunset laws became the norm. These regulations made it illegal for black people to be on the island after dark unless they were actively working in someone's home. John Williams, a gardener, was arrested in 1912 for being on Palm Beach at 7 in the evening. He had missed the last ferry and was walking to find shelter. The police report lists the charge as vagrancy. He spent 3 days in jail. The segregation went deeper than informal practice. It was written into property deeds. Racial covenants restricted who could own land. Club memberships came with explicit exclusions. The Bath and Tennis Club, founded in 1926, banned Jews and black members for decades. The Everglades Club followed the same policy. Schools were segregated until federal courts forced integration in the 1960s. Even then, resistance continued. White families pulled their children from public schools rather than let them attend classes with black students. The coconut palms that gave Palm Beach its name came from a shipwreck. In 1878, a Spanish cargo vessel ran aground off the coast. 20,000 coconuts spilled into the surf. Settlers collected them and planted them along the shore. The trees grew. The island took on a tropical appearance. This story gets told as charming folklore, a bit of lucky accident that shaped the landscape. But look closer. The coconuts were cargo, stolen goods from a wrecked ship that belonged to someone else. The settlers who planted them were claiming land that had been used by Seminole people before forced removal. The romantic origin story is actually a history of salvage colonialism. This is the island where Marjorie Merriweather Post decided to build the most expensive private residence in American history. She chose a location that existed because of deliberate segregation, designed to concentrate wealth in one place while keeping the labor force that made that wealth possible in another. Mar-a-Lago would rise on this foundation. The mansion's beauty would depend on workers who would never be allowed to live nearby, never be permitted to join the clubs, never appear in the photographs of success. The inequality was built into the ground itself before the first stone was laid.
Construction began in the fall of 1925. Marjorie Merriweather Post had hired architects Marion Sims Wyeth and Joseph Urban to design something unprecedented. The house would wrap in a crescent shape around a central courtyard. A tower would rise 75 feet above the structure, visible for miles. Dorian stone would be shipped from Italy. Antique tiles would come from Spain. The budget was essentially unlimited. Post had inherited the Postum Cereal Company when her father died in 1914. By the 1920s, after acquiring brands like Jell-O and Maxwell House Coffee, she had become one of the wealthiest women in the country. She could afford to build anything. She chose to build this. 600 workers arrived to make her vision real. Most came from West Palm Beach. Many were black men who had migrated from Georgia and the Carolinas looking for work. Others came from the Bahamas, arriving by boat for seasonal construction jobs. Some were Italian stonemasons brought in specifically to handle the imported Dorian stone. The workforce spoke multiple languages. They lived in different neighborhoods. What united them was the work itself and the wages they received for doing it. The pay was roughly 40 cents an hour for general labor. Skilled craftsmen like carpenters and stonemasons earned 60 to 75 cents. A work week ran 6 days, 10 to 12 hours daily. Most workers took home $15 to $20 per week. Compare that to the cost of living. Rent for a basic room in West Palm Beach averaged $8 monthly. Food for a family cost about $12 per week. The wages covered survival, barely. There was nothing left over, no savings, no cushion for illness or injury, just enough to come back tomorrow and work again. The working conditions were brutal. Florida in summer reaches temperatures in the 90s with humidity that makes the air feel solid. Workers mixed concrete by hand, hauled stone blocks, and climbed scaffolding in full sun. Heat exhaustion sent men to the hospital regularly. The Palm Beach Post reported 3 workers hospitalized in July 1926 for heat-related collapse. Their names were not included in the article. Falls were common. Scaffolding rose several stories high as the tower took shape. Antonio Morales fell 20 feet in March 1926. He broke his leg and could not work for 3 months. There was no workers' compensation. He received no pay during recovery. When he returned, his job had been filled by someone else. Another worker, Samuel Green, fell from the roof while installing tiles. He fractured his spine. Contemporary accounts describe him as unable to walk properly afterward. No record shows whether he received any support from Post or the contractors. Silica dust from cutting stone caused long-term lung damage. Workers wore no protective equipment. Masks were not provided. Decades later, doctors would identify silicosis as a common condition among stoneworkers from this era. The disease makes breathing progressively more difficult as scar tissue builds up in the lungs. Many workers from Mar-a-Lago's construction likely died early from respiratory failure. Their deaths would not have been connected back to the mansion. Now do the math. 600 workers, 4 years of construction, average wage of $18 per week. That totals roughly $2 million in labor costs. Marjorie Post's net worth in 1927 was estimated at $200 million. The gold leaf on the living room ceiling alone cost $100,000. She spent more decorating one room than she paid all 600 workers combined. When Mar-a-Lago opened in January 1927, Post hosted a dinner for close friends before the Everglades Club costume ball. Guests toured the completed mansion. Newspapers described the imported tiles, the carved stone, the soaring ceilings. The articles mentioned the architects by name. They praised Post's vision and taste. Not a single worker was identified. Their contribution was described in passive voice. The house was built. Stone was installed. Tiles were laid, as if the materials arranged themselves. Some descendants of those workers still live in West Palm Beach. James Peterson's grandfather worked on the foundation. He poured concrete for the coral base that anchors the entire structure. Peterson inherited his grandfather's tools, which he keeps in his garage. The family has photographs from the era. His grandfather stands with other workers during a break, all of them covered in dust. None of them are smiling. Marjorie Post's name appears on every historical marker. The workers who made her dream tangible were erased before the mortar dried. The mansion they built would change ownership multiple times over the following decades. None of them saw it again. Their children could not afford to visit. Their grandchildren would read about Mar-a-Lago in news reports about scandals and investigations, looking at a building their family helped create but never entered. The pattern was set. Labor would remain invisible while ownership gleamed in the spotlight. That pattern would repeat for the next 100 years.
Marjorie Merriweather Post built Mar-a-Lago because she was trying to solve a problem that had haunted her for years. She had money, she had power, she ran a company that fed millions of Americans, but the people she wanted to impress would not let her in. Old money in America operated on strict rules. Fortunes from banking, railroads, and shipping carried prestige. The families who controlled these industries had been wealthy for generations. Their names appeared in history books. They attended the same schools, married each other's children, and controlled the guest lists at the most exclusive clubs. Marjorie Post did not come from this world. Her father started with a barn in Michigan and sold a coffee substitute made from roasted wheat. Postum became successful because C.W. Post was a relentless marketer. He made dubious health claims. He advertised aggressively.
The product worked not because it was superior, but because people heard about it constantly. The fortune came from breakfast cereal. The Astors looked down on her. The Vanderbilts were polite but distant. At Newport, where the truly elite gathered each summer, Marjorie received invitations to secondary events, but never the inner circle. She was too new. Her money was too commercial. Cereal money was not serious money. This rejection stung despite her real achievements. When her father died in 1914, she inherited the company at age 27. She could have handed management to male executives and collected dividends. Instead, she attended board meetings, she studied the business, she pushed for acquisitions. The purchase of Jell-O in 1925 expanded the company's reach into every grocery store. The Maxwell House coffee acquisition in 1928 did the same. When she met Clarence Birdseye and learned about his flash freezing process for food preservation, she immediately understood the potential. Her second husband, E.F. Hutton, was skeptical. Grocers would need expensive freezers. Consumers were not accustomed to frozen products. Marjorie insisted. They bought General Seafood Corporation for $22 million in 1929. The Postum cereal company became General Foods. She had built an empire. But empire building did not equal acceptance. She faced real barriers. Until 1920, she could not vote. In corporate meetings, male executives often spoke over her or directed questions to the men in the room. Her marriages were examined and criticized in ways that male business leaders' personal lives were not. She divorced her first husband, Edward Close, in 1919. The second marriage to E.F. Hutton lasted 15 years before ending in divorce. The third marriage to Joseph Davies, a lawyer and diplomat, also eventually failed. Each divorce brought social judgment and gossip. Here is the paradox. Marjorie Post experienced genuine discrimination based on gender and class. She was excluded from circles that should have recognized her accomplishments. Old money dismissed her as vulgar, despite her education and sophistication. She understood what it felt like to be judged unfairly. Yet, this experience did not lead her to question the system itself. It led her to try harder to meet the system's standards. She wanted a bigger mansion, more impressive parties, closer proximity to power. Her response to exclusion was not solidarity with other excluded people. It was an attempt to become so undeniably important that exclusion would no longer be possible. Mar-a-Lago was that attempt. If she could not earn acceptance, she would build something too spectacular to ignore. The mansion would host presidents and royalty. It would become a center of diplomatic gatherings. People who snubbed her would have to acknowledge what she had created. The estate was not just a house, it was an argument made in stone and gold. An argument that said, wealth on this scale, displayed with this much grandeur, demanded respect. But acceptance cannot be purchased, not really. The same people who looked down on cereal money visited Mar-a-Lago and admired the architecture, while still considering Marjorie Post slightly outside their world. She remained new money in their eyes, no matter how much she spent or how many parties she threw. The monument to belonging never quite achieved its purpose. Can we hold two truths at once? Marjorie Post experienced real barriers as a woman in business and as someone from a commercial fortune in an aristocratic social world. Those barriers were unfair. They limited her based on arbitrary distinctions that had nothing to do with her abilities or character. That truth is real. And also true, she built her mansion using exploited labor, paying wages that trapped workers in poverty while spending lavishly on imported luxuries. She created beauty through a system that valued decorative objects more than human welfare. Both things are real. The barriers she faced do not erase the harm she caused. The harm she caused does not make her barriers less real. She built a monument to belonging. It would outlast her by decades, becoming more controversial and more famous than she ever imagined, but it would not give her what she wanted.
The belonging would remain just out of reach, no matter how high the tower rose or how much gold covered the ceilings. The fortress she built to prove her worth would eventually reveal something quite different about how American success actually works.
Marjorie Merriweather Post knew she was dying. In 1973, at age 86, with her health failing, she had to decide what would happen to her 3 estates. Hillwood in Washington would become a museum for her Russian art collection. Camp Topridge in the Adirondacks could go to New York State. But Mar-a-Lago presented a problem. The operating costs alone exceeded $1 million annually. Staff salaries, maintenance, utilities, property taxes, repairs to handle salt air corrosion and hurricane damage. No single family could realistically sustain these expenses. Her children had their own lives and no interest in inheriting a palace that required constant financial hemorrhaging. She found what seemed like the perfect solution. She would donate Mar-a-Lago to the United States government. It would become a winter White House, a retreat where presidents could host foreign leaders in a setting that showcased American prosperity. The house could accommodate large diplomatic gatherings. The location offered privacy and pleasant weather. The architecture projected exactly the image Post believed the country should present to the world. A trust fund of $100,000 annually would help offset maintenance costs. Congress would accept the gift. Presidents would use it. Her legacy would be secured as the woman who gave America its southern presidential retreat. Congress approved the donation in 1972. President Nixon signed the legislation. Post died in September 1973. Mar-a-Lago transferred to government ownership as planned. Then reality hit. Nixon had already bought his own Florida property in Key Biscayne. He visited Mar-a-Lago once for an inspection tour in 1974, then never returned. Watergate consumed the rest of his presidency. Gerald Ford preferred skiing in Colorado. The house sat empty. Jimmy Carter's administration took the evaluation seriously. Staff toured the property. Security experts assessed what would be required to protect a sitting president there. The findings were discouraging. The annual maintenance costs were not $1 million. They were closer to $2 million and rising. The trust fund of $100,000 covered barely 5% of actual expenses. Taxpayers would shoulder the remaining burden indefinitely. Security presented additional problems. The property sat on a narrow barrier island with a public road nearby. Palm Beach International Airport generated constant aircraft noise. Protecting a president would require infrastructure that did not exist and would cost millions more to install. Multiple access points made the site difficult to control. In an emergency, evacuating the president from an island connected to the mainland by a handful of easily blocked bridges would be complicated and dangerous. The recommendation came back clearly. Accepting the gift would be fiscally irresponsible. Congress debated through 1979 and 1980. In December 1980, legislation transferred Mar-a-Lago back to the Post Foundation. The government's ownership had lasted 7 years. No president had ever slept there. The winter White House that Marjorie Post envisioned never happened because federal officials determined that taxpayer money should not fund a luxury property with dubious practical use. Remember that decision. The government said no because it was too expensive. The costs could not be justified. American citizens should not pay to maintain a Palm Beach mansion. Fast forward to 2017. Donald Trump has been elected president. He spends roughly 1 out of every 3 days of his presidency at Mar-a-Lago. He hosts foreign leaders there. He conducts official business from the property. He holds meetings in the dining room with classified information discussed within earshot of club members. The winter White House becomes real. But there's a crucial difference. Trump owns the property. He profits from it, and taxpayers pay far more than the government would have spent if they had kept Post's original gift.
Secret Service costs alone ran between $3 and $5 million per visit. Trump went to Mar-a-Lago approximately 150 times during his presidency. Do that math. $450 million to $750 million in security costs. Coast Guard deployments, local police overtime, airspace restrictions that disrupted Palm Beach International Airport, road closures that hurt local businesses. The federal government paid all of it, but unlike owning the property, they got nothing in return. The money flowed to support a private club that charged members for access and kept the profits. The ethical violation sits right there in the open. The president profits from official government functions conducted at his own property. The government rejected Mar-a-Lago as a gift because it was too expensive for taxpayers. But when a president uses his private property for official purposes, taxpayers end up paying even more. The owner makes money, and there is no public ownership or control. The decision that seemed fiscally responsible in 1981 got reversed through a loophole in 2017. The loophole was simple. No specific law prevented a president from conducting business at property he owned. Ethics rules existed, but had no enforcement mechanism. The Emoluments Clause in the Constitution prohibits federal officials from receiving payments from foreign governments. Legal scholars argued Trump violated this constantly when foreign governments bought Mar-a-Lago memberships or held events there. But constitutional violations require consequences, and those consequences never arrived. If it was too expensive for taxpayers in 1981, why was it acceptable in 2017? The answer is that it was not acceptable. The system had simply broken down. Rules existed on paper. Enforcement required political will. Political will required elected officials willing to stand up to a president from their own party. That will did not materialize. So taxpayers funded the Winter White House that the government wisely rejected decades earlier. The costs were socialized. The profits stayed private. This pattern would repeat in more direct and brazen ways. The loopholes had been tested. They held. The next steps would push further.
Donald Trump first noticed Mar-a-Lago while vacationing in Florida in 1982. The sprawling estate caught his attention immediately. 17 acres stretching from ocean to inland waterway. A mansion that looked like something from Mediterranean royalty transplanted to an American beach. The Post Foundation had listed the property at $20 million. Nothing else on the Florida coast compared. Trump was 39 years old. Trump Tower was under construction in Manhattan. His reputation for ambitious projects was building. But his first offer for Mar-a-Lago was $15 million. The foundation rejected it immediately. The asking price reflected decades of construction costs and irreplaceable craftsmanship. They wanted full value. 3 years passed. Other buyers circled the property. Several signed purchase contracts. Each deal collapsed before closing. Inspections revealed expensive repairs. Financing fell through. Market conditions weakened. The mansion sat unsold. Trump watched and waited. Then he made his move. A narrow strip of beachfront property lay between Mar-a-Lago and the ocean. It belonged to Jack Massey, a businessman who had built Kentucky Fried Chicken into a national chain. Trump paid Massey $2 million for the land in 1985. Then he announced his plan. He intended to build a house on the beach strip. The structure would rise directly in Mar-a-Lago's sightline. Anyone standing on the famous loggia would see Trump's roof instead of the Atlantic Ocean. The mansion's most celebrated feature, its unobstructed ocean views, would be permanently destroyed. The foundation understood the threat immediately. If they sold to Trump at a reduced price, they would take a loss. But if they refused and Trump built his spite house, Mar-a-Lago would become nearly worthless. No other buyers would want a historic estate with blocked views. The property's value would crater. Trump had created a crisis. Now he offered the solution. He would buy Mar-a-Lago and not build on the beach strip. The price came down to approximately $8 to $10 million total. Sources vary on the exact figure because the deal included the mansion, the land, and all the furnishings inside. Those furnishings, the antiques and art that Post had collected over decades, were independently valued at $8 million. Trump paid roughly the same for the entire property as the contents alone were worth. Was the beach house plan legal? Zoning permitted residential construction on that strip. Trump could have built. But did he ever actually intend to follow through, or was this pure leverage, a threat designed to force the price down? The answer is unknowable. What is knowable is the result. Trump acquired a property that cost the modern equivalent of $100 million to construct for less than 10% of that amount. He bought it because he was willing to threaten its destruction and because the foundation, without other options, capitulated. This is how leveraged buyouts work at the highest levels. You do not save money through hard work or careful budgeting. You identify leverage. You create a crisis. You position yourself as the only solution. The tactics are ruthless but legal. The system allows this. More than allows it, the system rewards it. Trump turned this transaction into a chapter in his autobiography, presenting it as proof of business genius. Genius is one word, extraction is another. But buying the property was only step one. The ongoing costs remained. Maintenance exceeded $3 million annually. The house was absurdly oversized for a private residence. The tax burden as a personal home was substantial. Trump needed revenue. He approached the town council with a proposal to subdivide the estate into residential lots. They rejected him. Mar-a-Lago held National Historic Landmark status. The neighbors had no interest in construction and new development. The council told Trump to find another solution. The solution was the club. In 1993, Trump and the town reached a compromise. He could convert Mar-a-Lago into a private membership club. Events, dining, and guest accommodations for members would be permitted. In exchange, he would maintain the historic structure. The arrangement gave Trump a revenue stream while preserving the estate's character. The Mar-a-Lago Club opened in 1995. Initiation fees started at $25,000. They rose to $100,000 within a few years. Annual dues added $14,000 more. The waiting list grew. Membership was capped at $500. Revenue from dues and events stabilized the finances. Trump had solved the problem that defeated the federal government and the Post Foundation. He made other people pay for the upkeep. The club that almost nobody could afford funded the preservation of a mansion built by workers who earned 40 cents an hour. The irony ran deep, but the financial model worked. Mar-a-Lago became profitable. Trump had turned an acquisition gamble into a sustainable business. The property that had been too expensive for America's government was now paying for itself and generating profit for one man. The pattern was clear. Threaten destruction, negotiate from strength, monetize access, keep the profits private while making sure the costs get spread to everyone else. This approach, refined through the Mar-a-Lago deal, would become the template for everything that followed. The club was just the beginning.
By the mid-1990s, Palm Beach's most exclusive clubs still operated under openly discriminatory membership policies. The Bath and Tennis Club did not accept Jewish members. Neither did the Everglades Club. These were not informal practices. They were explicit policies maintained openly. Prospective members understood the restrictions before applying. The clubs defended these rules as private association rights, legal under American law. Donald Trump had applied to these clubs when he first spent time in Palm Beach. They turned him down. The reasons were not entirely clear, but Trump was seen as flashy, commercial, and connected to casino gambling. He did not fit the old money culture these institutions protected. The rejection stayed with him. When Mar-a-Lago opened as a club in 1995, Trump made a different choice. The club would accept members regardless of religion or race. Jewish families could join, so could African Americans.
The policy was stated clearly in membership materials. Abraham Foxman, national director of the Anti-Defamation League, praised Trump publicly. He told reporters that Trump had put a spotlight on the discriminatory practices that other Palm Beach clubs continued to maintain. The ADL considered this a meaningful step forward. But examine deeper. The initiation fee at Mar-a-Lago was $100,000. Annual dues added $14,000. Within a few years, the initiation fee would double to $200,000. Today, it exceeds $500,000. Who can afford this? Not working-class families, not middle-class families, not even upper-middle-class families. The barrier to entry effectively limited membership to the very wealthy. Trump had removed racial and religious exclusions, but he replaced them with a class barrier just as impenetrable. Poor people of all races remained excluded. A black doctor earning $200,000 a year could not afford membership. Neither could a Jewish teacher or a Latino small business owner. The diversity was real, but it was wealthy diversity. The club integrated elites while maintaining rigid economic stratification. The fundamental inequality persisted, it just looked different. In 1997, Trump sued the town of Palm Beach. He claimed that officials were imposing restrictions on Mar-a-Lago that they did not apply to clubs with discriminatory membership policies. He used civil rights language to frame the lawsuit. The ADL supported him again. Was Trump right about the discrimination? Yes. Other clubs did maintain racist policies, and the town had not challenged them with the same vigor it challenged Mar-a-Lago's operations. Was Trump principled? That is harder to answer. His other properties did not show the same commitment to integration. His housing developments in New York had faced federal discrimination lawsuits in the 1970s for refusing to rent to black applicants. The Justice Department had sued his company for violating the Fair Housing Act. That case ended with a settlement and consent decree. The integration at Mar-a-Lago looked less like moral conviction and more like strategic positioning. Trump had identified an untapped market. Many wealthy Jewish families lived in Palm Beach and nearby areas. They had been shut out of existing clubs. By welcoming them, Trump gained members that competitors could not access. The policy made business sense. It also happened to be the right thing to do in breaking down religious barriers. Both things can be true. Good outcome, mixed motives. But focus on who was still invisible: the Mar-a-Lago staff. The club had integrated its membership. Who cleaned the bathrooms? Who cooked the meals? Who maintained the grounds? Workers at the club were predominantly Hispanic and black, earning hourly wages far below what members paid in monthly dues. 1 month's dues could cover a worker's annual salary. The demographics inside the club told the story clearly. Wealthy people of various backgrounds mingled as equals in the dining rooms and on the terraces. The people serving them came from a narrow demographic band with limited economic mobility. This pattern is familiar. Diversifying the elite while maintaining an exploited workforce underneath looks like progress. It is progress compared to outright exclusion. Breaking religious and racial barriers in membership represented a real improvement over the bigotry of Bath and Tennis or Everglades, but it was not structural change. The workers who made the club function still received inadequate wages. They still lacked benefits and job security. Their children still could not afford to visit the property their parents maintained. The fundamental economic barrier remained intact. Integration as marketing strategy is not the same as integration as justice. Trump broke one barrier. The more fundamental barrier of wealth and class stayed firmly in place. That barrier would become increasingly important as the club transitioned from a social venue to something much more controversial. Access to power was for sale, legally, and the price was higher than most Americans could comprehend.
February 2017. Donald Trump has been president for 3 weeks. He flies to Mar-a-Lago for the first of what will become regular visits. The property transforms overnight from a private club into something unprecedented in American history,
a sitting president conducting official government business at a property he owns and profits from. The security requirements are massive. The Secret Service deploys dozens of agents. They rent rooms at Mar-a-Lago itself to maintain round-the-clock protection. Trump's company charges the government for these rooms. The president's security detail pays Trump's business to protect the president. The Coast Guard stations boats offshore, monitoring the waterways 24 hours daily. Local Palm Beach police work overtime directing traffic and maintaining road closures. Officers earn time-and-a-half pay. The town sends the bill to federal taxpayers. Airspace above the property becomes restricted. Palm Beach International Airport, 3 miles away, must reroute flights during presidential visits. Airlines lose revenue. Passengers face delays. The airport absorbs the costs. Road closures choke local businesses. Southern Boulevard, a main commercial artery, gets blocked whenever the presidential motorcade moves. Shops and restaurants lose customers who cannot reach them. The economic impact spreads through the community, but the community does not get compensated. These are considered acceptable costs of hosting the president. Now calculate the total. Trump visited Mar-a-Lago approximately 150 times during his 4-year presidency. Security and logistics for each visit cost between $3 and $5 million, according to reports from the Government Accountability Office and Freedom of Information Act documents obtained by watchdog groups. Use the conservative estimate. $3 million per visit times 150 visits equals $450 million. Use the higher estimate, and the total reaches $750 million. Taxpayers paid every cent. Where did the money go? Secret Service agents rented rooms at Trump's club. Documents released through FOIA requests show the Trump Organization received payments directly from the Secret Service for accommodations. Staff traveling with the president stayed at Mar-a-Lago as well. More payments to Trump's company. Equipment rentals, facility fees, event space charges, all flowing from government accounts to Trump's business. The exact amounts remain partially hidden. The Trump Organization did not release complete financial records, but the available data shows hundreds of thousands of dollars in direct payments. The ethical violation sits in plain sight, a president profiting from official government functions. No specific law prevented this. The framers of the Constitution did not anticipate a president who would maintain ownership of commercial properties while in office. Presidents historically used blind trusts or divested from businesses. Trump did neither. Ethics rules existed, but had no enforcement mechanism beyond congressional oversight. That oversight never materialized effectively. The Emoluments Clause in the Constitution prohibits federal officials from receiving payments from foreign governments without congressional consent. Legal scholars argued Trump violated this constantly. Foreign governments bought Mar-a-Lago memberships. Saudi Arabia held events there. Chinese government-connected businesses bought memberships. The access was for sale. The price was clear. The legality was never seriously contested, despite the obvious corruption. The Abe dinner revealed how dangerous this arrangement could become. In February 2017, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited Mar-a-Lago for meetings with Trump. During dinner on the outdoor terrace, surrounded by club members, word arrived that North Korea had launched a ballistic missile. Trump and Abe discussed the situation at the table. Aides used their phone flashlights to illuminate documents. Club members watched and photographed the scene. One member posted photos to social media showing the military aide carrying the nuclear football standing in the dining area. Classified information was being discussed in a room full of people with no security clearances. The security breach drew criticism from former national security officials. Michael Hayden,
former CIA and NSA director, called it shocking. No consequences followed. The practice continued. Compare this to other presidents. Camp David, the traditional presidential retreat, is government property. Security costs are minimal because the facility was designed for presidential use. Infrastructure exists. No president profits from staying there. Historical presidential retreats, from FDR's Warm Springs to Bush's Crawford Ranch, were either public property or private homes where official business was kept to a minimum. Trump transformed Mar-a-Lago into a functional winter White House while maintaining private ownership and profit. The arrangement was legal, but legal and ethical are different standards. The government had determined in 1981 that taxpayers should not fund Mar-a-Lago because the expense could not be justified. Yet from 2017 to 2021, taxpayers paid more than the original maintenance concerns, while Trump collected revenue from the very activities causing those expenses. The loophole was clear. The exploitation was obvious. The system allowed it because the system was not designed to prevent someone from doing exactly this. Every American paid approximately $2 towards securing Mar-a-Lago during Trump's presidency. $2 sounds like nothing, but $2 times every taxpayer, multiplied across 4 years, flows into one man's business while he serves as president. The scale makes the corruption undeniable. The legality makes it harder to challenge. And then, in 2022, FBI agents would discover that something else had been happening at Mar-a-Lago, something that couldn't be explained away by legal loopholes or dismissed as mere ethics concerns.
January 2021. Donald Trump leaves the White House after losing the 2020 election. He takes documents with him. Federal law is clear about what happens to presidential records. The Presidential Records Act requires all documents created during a presidency to be transferred to the National Archives when the president leaves office. This includes correspondence, memos, reports, and classified materials. The National Archives is responsible for preserving these records and managing access to them. Former presidents can request to see their own records. They cannot take them home. Trump took them home. Boxes containing thousands of pages went to Mar-a-Lago. They were stored in various locations around the property: a storage room, a bathroom, the ballroom where members held events. Initial reports suggested 15 boxes left the White House. Later evidence showed there were more. Early 2022. National Archives staff realized documents were missing. They contacted Trump's representatives and requested the materials be returned. Negotiations went on for weeks. In January 2022, 15 boxes arrived at the National Archives. Staff began reviewing the contents. They immediately found documents marked as classified. Some carried designations indicating highly sensitive material. The archives contacted the Department of Justice. This was not an administrative mix-up. This was potentially a criminal matter. The DOJ opened an investigation. This was unusual. Former presidents rarely face criminal investigations for their handling of documents. The standard practice is negotiation and eventual compliance. But the classified markings changed the situation. Federal law prohibits unauthorized retention of classified national defense information. The law applies to everyone, including former presidents. A grand jury issued a subpoena in May 2022. The subpoena demanded all remaining documents with classification markings. Trump's attorneys searched Mar-a-Lago and handed over additional materials in June. They provided a certification signed by Trump's lawyer stating that all classified documents had been returned. The certification said a diligent search had been conducted. It said full compliance had been achieved. The certification was false. The FBI knew it was false because they had developed evidence showing classified documents remained at the property.
Sources and methods for obtaining this evidence remain partially sealed, but court filings indicate witness testimony and other investigative techniques confirmed documents were still there. August 8, 2022. FBI agents executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. The search lasted several hours. Agents photographed rooms and seized materials from multiple locations. When the search concluded, they had recovered over 100 additional classified documents. The documents bore classification markings, including Top Secret and SCI, which stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information. This designation indicates intelligence gathered through specific methods that must be protected to avoid compromising sources and operations. Photos released in court filings showed documents spread across the floor of a storage area. Classification cover sheets with colored borders marked the sensitivity levels clearly. Red borders indicate secret classification.
Yellow borders indicate top secret. The rainbow of colors in the photographs documented the range of sensitive materials stored in a country club. Court filings described the nature of the documents based on government assessments. Some contained information about nuclear weapons capabilities. Others detailed intelligence gathering methods. Some described foreign government information provided to the United States under agreements requiring protection. Defense planning materials showed military options and assessments. Why these classifications matter comes down to consequences. Nuclear weapons information in the wrong hands helps adversaries develop their own capabilities or exploit weaknesses in American systems. Intelligence gathering methods, when exposed, allow foreign governments to identify and eliminate sources. People die when sources are burned. Foreign governments stop sharing information when they learn their secrets are not protected. Defense planning materials give adversaries insight into American military options and decision-making. Who had access to these documents at Mar-a-Lago? Club members walked through areas where boxes were stored. Mar-a-Lago staff, housekeepers, and maintenance workers worked in rooms containing classified material. None of these people had security clearances. Event guests attended functions in the ballroom where some documents were kept. Foreign nationals who were club members had the same access as American citizens. The potential for exposure was extraordinary. This had never happened before in modern American history. June 2023, a federal grand jury indicted Trump on 37 counts. The charges included willful retention of national defense information, obstruction of justice, and making false statements. Additional charges were added later, bringing the total to 40 counts. Each charge carried potential prison time. Willful retention means knowingly keeping classified documents without authorization. The prosecution would need to prove Trump knew he had the documents and knew he was not supposed to keep them. The obstruction charges relate to actions taken to hide documents from investigators. This includes allegedly directing staff to move boxes and providing the false certification to the FBI. The false statements charges involve claims made to investigators that contradicted known facts. Trump's defenses developed quickly. He claimed he had declassified everything before leaving office. Federal law allows presidents to declassify documents, but declassification requires a process. Documents must be marked to show their status has changed. Agencies that originated the classification must be notified. No evidence supported Trump's claim that he had followed any declassification process. He simply asserted it had happened. He claimed the documents were his property. The Presidential Records Act explicitly states that presidential records belong to the public and must be transferred to the archives. The law was passed after Watergate specifically to prevent presidents from treating official documents as personal property. Trump's claim had no legal basis. He invoked the Presidential Records Act itself as a defense, arguing it gave him authority over the documents. But the PRA creates a process for resolving disputes about what constitutes a presidential record versus a personal record. That process involves the archives and does not permit presidents to unilaterally decide to keep classified national defense information. Legal experts across the political spectrum said this defense would fail. The case was assigned to Judge Aileen Cannon in the Southern District of Florida. Cannon had been appointed by Trump in 2020. She had previously issued rulings in Trump's favor in matters related to the search warrant, rulings that an appeals court overturned with sharp criticism of her legal reasoning. Defense motions began piling up, requests to delay the trial, challenges to the special counsel's authority, objections to protective orders governing classified information. Each motion created delay. Compare this case to others involving classified documents. David Petraeus, former CIA director and four-star general, pleaded guilty to unauthorized removal and retention of classified information. He had shared classified notebooks with his biographer. He received 2 years probation and a fine. Reality Winner, an NSA contractor, leaked one classified document to the media to expose what she believed was important information about Russian election interference. She received 5 years in prison. The disparity was stark. The documents Trump retained were more numerous, more highly classified, and held for longer. The obstruction alleged in his case had no parallel in the other prosecutions. Trump faced charges that could result in decades in prison if convicted. But as of late 2024, the case remained tied up in pre-trial proceedings. Judge Cannon had granted delay after delay. Trial dates came and went. The legal maneuvering showed no signs of reaching resolution. Whether the case would ever reach a jury remained uncertain. What was certain was that for nearly 2 years, classified documents had been stored in a social club. And while lawyers argued about admissibility and jurisdiction and the scope of presidential authority, the building itself faced a different threat, one that no amount of money or legal maneuvering could stop.
Barrier islands are temporary. Geologists understand this clearly. These narrow strips of sand form through wave action and sediment deposits. They shift with currents and storms. They migrate inland over decades and centuries. Building permanent structures on them defies basic physical reality. Mar-a-Lago sits on a barrier island. The mansion is 5 to 10 feet above current sea level. That elevation seemed safe when construction began in the 1920s. It is not safe anymore. The physics are straightforward. Global temperatures rise as greenhouse gas concentrations increase. Warmer temperatures cause thermal expansion of seawater. Water molecules take up more space when heated. Glaciers and ice sheets melt, adding water to the oceans. Sea levels rise. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration tracks these changes precisely. Their data for Palm Beach shows sea levels rising at a rate of approximately 3 millimeters per year. That rate is accelerating. Current projections indicate Palm Beach could see 1 to 2 feet of additional sea level rise by 2050. By 2100, estimates range from 3 to 7 feet, depending on how quickly polar ice sheets collapse. 1 foot of sea level rise sounds manageable. It is not. King tides already flood coastal areas of Palm Beach several times annually. These exceptionally high tides occur when the sun and moon align to create maximum gravitational pull. Water rises higher than normal high tide. Streets flood. Seawater backs up through storm drains. Properties that stayed dry for decades now experience regular flooding. Add 1 foot of permanent sea level rise, and king tides become catastrophic. Add 2 feet, and much of the island becomes uninhabitable without massive infrastructure changes. Hurricane intensity is increasing. Warmer ocean temperatures provide more energy for storm development. Category 4 and 5 hurricanes are becoming more common. Storm surge, the wall of water pushed ahead of a hurricane, reaches higher levels as sea level rises.
A Category 3 hurricane that would have produced 6 feet of surge in the 1920s now produces 7 or 8 feet. The difference determines whether water overtops seawalls or stays contained. The Mar-a-Lago seawall requires constant reinforcement. The original wall from the 1920s has been rebuilt multiple times. Salt water corrodes concrete and steel. Wave action gradually undermines foundations. Maintenance costs escalate. Reports indicate hundreds of thousands of dollars spent annually just maintaining the barrier between the estate and the ocean. Eventually, maintaining the wall will become impossible. The ocean will win. Coastal engineers estimate that under current sea level rise scenarios, the seawall fails completely sometime between 2060 and 2080. That timeline assumes regular maintenance and no catastrophic storm damage in the meantime. Who pays for coastal protection? The property is private, but public infrastructure supports it. The National Flood Insurance Program, run by the federal government, subsidizes insurance for properties in flood zones. Premiums are kept artificially low through taxpayer subsidies. When hurricanes cause damage, FEMA provides disaster relief. The money comes from federal taxpayers across the country. Beach renourishment projects, where sand is pumped onto eroding beaches, cost millions and are funded through municipal bonds backed by tax revenue. Palm Beach has spent over $20 million on beach projects in the past decade.
The pattern is familiar. Wealthy individuals build luxury properties in vulnerable locations. Climate change threatens those investments. They demand public money to protect private property. Taxpayers who will never set foot on Mar-a-Lago subsidize its survival. When the property eventually becomes indefensible against rising seas, who covers the loss? If history is a guide, government buyouts will compensate owners at full market value. Taxpayers pay again. Environmental justice demands comparing this treatment to what happens in poor communities. After Hurricane Katrina in 2005, the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans flooded catastrophically. Most residents were Black and working class. They lost homes, businesses, and possessions. Federal assistance was slow and inadequate. Many families never received enough money to rebuild. The neighborhood depopulated. Compare that to how coastal property owners in wealthy communities are treated. Their properties get protected with seawalls and beach renourishment. Their insurance claims get paid. Their homes get rebuilt with federal disaster assistance. The disparity reveals who the system protects and who it abandons. Mar-a-Lago may be underwater in 50 to 100 years. What should be preserved from it? The antique tiles could be salvaged and placed in a museum. The Dorian stone would survive submersion and could theoretically be recovered. But the structure as a whole cannot be moved. When the ocean reclaims the island, decisions will have to be made. Should taxpayers fund extreme measures to protect a private club? Should the property be abandoned and allowed to return to the sea? Who decides? Current law gives property owners substantial rights. Trump or future owners could demand government protection indefinitely. Courts would have to balance private property rights against public costs and environmental reality. Climate scientists have been warning about these scenarios for decades. Trump publicly called climate change a hoax. He withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. He rolled back regulations designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, all while owning property directly threatened by the very phenomenon he denied existed. The cognitive dissonance was stark. The immediate profits from running a luxury club outweighed concerns about long-term survival. This is not unique to Trump. Wealthy developers continue building on vulnerable coastlines despite knowing the risks. They calculate that they will profit in the short term and someone else will bear the long-term costs. The ocean is patient. It does not negotiate or compromise. It follows physical laws. Rising seas will continue rising, regardless of property values or political power. But while nature operates on geological timescales, human systems move faster.
The decisions being made now about who pays for coastal protection and who receives compensation for climate losses will reveal what our society actually values. Those decisions are being made in courtrooms and legislative chambers and municipal planning offices right now. The outcomes are not predetermined. They depend on whether citizens demand equity or allow the existing pattern to continue. And those systems are about to be tested by people who see everything that happens at Mar-a-Lago from a perspective the club members never consider.
Walk through Mar-a-Lago today, and you will encounter approximately 150 workers. Their shifts start before dawn. Housekeepers arrive at 5:30 in the morning to begin cleaning guest rooms and public spaces before members wake up. Groundskeepers check irrigation systems and trim hedges while dew still covers the grass. Kitchen staff prep ingredients for breakfast service. Servers set tables in the dining room. Maintenance crews inspect mechanical systems that keep the estate functioning. Many of these workers are immigrants. Some came from Central America, seeking economic opportunity. Others arrived from Caribbean islands where job prospects were limited. They work at Mar-a-Lago because it pays better than many alternatives in the hospitality industry, though not by much. Exact wage data is difficult to obtain because the Trump Organization does not publicly disclose employee compensation. But reporting from workers who have spoken to journalists and from job postings suggests housekeepers earn approximately $15 to $17 per hour. Servers earn minimum wage plus tips, which fluctuates based on member generosity. Groundskeepers and maintenance workers earn slightly more, between $18 and $22 hourly. Compare those wages to the cost of living in Palm Beach County. Median rent for a one-bedroom apartment is roughly $1,800 monthly. Groceries for a family average $600 per month. Transportation, healthcare, and basic utilities add hundreds more. A worker earning $15 per hour, working 40 hours weekly, brings home approximately $2,400 monthly after taxes. That leaves a few $100 margin after covering basic necessities. There is nothing left for savings, emergencies, or unexpected expenses. One car repair or medical bill can create a financial crisis. These workers witnessed extraordinary events. During Trump's presidency, they worked around classified discussions with foreign leaders. Prime Minister Abe of Japan sat in the dining room they served. Chinese President Xi Jinping attended a summit they helped staff. Sensitive national security matters were discussed in spaces they cleaned. They overheard conversations not meant for their ears. They saw documents left in offices and meeting rooms. None of this was their responsibility. They were simply doing their jobs. Post-presidency brought different chaos. The FBI raid in August 2022 locked down the property. Workers arrived for shifts to find federal agents searching rooms and seizing materials. Some were questioned about what they had seen and where boxes had been stored. Others were sent home while the search continued. The legal proceedings that followed created ongoing uncertainty. Media trucks parked outside the gates, helicopters circled overhead. Protesters and supporters gathered on public streets nearby. The circus atmosphere made normal work difficult. Security clearances are standard for anyone working in close proximity to classified information. White House staff undergo thorough background checks. Their families are investigated. Financial records are reviewed. Foreign contacts are documented. The process takes months. Mar-a-Lago employees had no such clearances. Background checks were minimal, limited to what hospitality businesses typically conduct. Workers who might have criminal records for minor offenses could be hired. Financial desperation made them vulnerable to foreign intelligence services looking for access. None of this violated any law because Mar-a-Lago was a private club, not a government facility. But when that private club became a functional winter White House and storage site for classified documents, the lack of screening created obvious security risks.
Working conditions are typical of high-end hospitality: long hours on feet, short breaks, management pressure to maintain perfect appearances. The club is non-union. Workers have limited leverage to negotiate better pay or conditions. Job security is uncertain. During COVID-19, Mar-a-Lago closed briefly in spring 2020. Workers were furloughed without pay. When the property reopened, some were called back, others were not. The club did not offer health insurance to many hourly workers. Those who wanted coverage had to purchase it through the marketplace at their own expense. Their perspective, when workers speak publicly, is remarkably consistent. Most express a version of the same sentiment. They do their jobs and go home. They do not involve themselves in politics or legal matters beyond their control. Fear of retaliation keeps many silent. Non-disclosure agreements signed as a condition of employment prohibit workers from discussing what happens at the property. Violating an NDA can result in termination and legal action. Economic necessity overrides discomfort. The workers need the paychecks. They cannot afford to lose their jobs over principle. Some take pride in their work. They maintain one of the most famous properties in Florida. They serve high-profile members and keep a national historic landmark in pristine condition. The craftsmanship matters to them, even if the context troubles them. This tension is real. Workers can feel both proud of their skill and uncomfortable with the environment. Both feelings exist simultaneously. The parallels to the 1920s are striking. Workers who built Mar-a-Lago were never allowed back as guests. The same is true today. Workers who maintain the property cannot afford membership. Their children will not grow up attending events in the ballroom. The social distance remains absolute. The workers who built Paradise a century ago earned 40 cents an hour, while Marjorie Post spent hundreds of thousands on gold leaf.
What are these workers
Today's
owed?
workers earn
The
$15
answer
to $20
starts with
per hour,
compensation.
while members
A
pay
living
$500.
wage means earnings sufficient to afford housing, food, health care, and basic stability without working multiple jobs or going into debt. For Palm Beach County, economists estimate that requires approximately $25 per hour for a single adult, more for families. Current wages fall short. Health care should be provided by employers, not left to individuals to purchase at rates they cannot afford. Job security means protection from arbitrary termination and clear paths for grievance and dispute resolution. Dignity requires treating workers as essential to the operation, not as interchangeable and disposable. Recognition matters too. Their labor makes everything at Mar-a-Lago possible. Without them, the gold tarnishes, the gardens become overgrown, and the wealthy members have no one to serve them meals. Yet their names appear nowhere. No plaques honor them. No historical markers acknowledge them. They are written out of the story just as thoroughly as the workers who built the mansion in the first place. They cleaned the ballroom where classified documents sat in storage boxes. They serve members who paid hundreds of thousands for access to a sitting president. They maintain grounds threatened by rising seas while the owner denies climate change exists, and most Americans will never know their names. The pattern persists. A century separates the original construction crew from today's housekeeping staff, but the invisibility remains identical. The mansion has survived. The workers who made that survival possible stay hidden. Just like a century ago, their contribution is erased while ownership takes credit for everything. Mar-a-Lago is not unique. Every luxury property tells a similar story. Underpaid workers maintain estates they cannot afford to visit. Tax structures favor property owners over laborers. Environmental damage accumulates while the wealthy enjoy amenities powered by fossil fuels. Access to powerful people is purchased through memberships and donations. This is how American wealth operates at scale. Mar-a-Lago makes the pattern visible in one building. If you understand Mar-a-Lago, you understand the system. The mansion concentrates a century of decisions into 17 acres. Who builds and who owns? who profits and who pays, what gets preserved and what gets erased. Every estate, every corporate headquarters, every exclusive development follows similar logic. The details vary, the structure stays the same. Start asking questions about any concentration of wealth or power. Who built it? Trace the labor back to the beginning. Find the workers whose names do not appear in promotional materials. What were they paid? What conditions did they face? Their answers reveal whether prosperity was shared or extracted. Who maintains it? Current workers hold the operation together. Their wages and working conditions show whether the wealth concentrates or circulates. Who profits? Follow the money through ownership structures, shell companies, and trusts. Identify who captures gains and who bears risks. Who pays the external costs? Taxpayers fund infrastructure. Communities absorb environmental damage. Calculate who receives benefits and who shoulders burdens. What laws enable this arrangement? Every power structure rests on legal frameworks: tax codes, zoning regulations, labor laws, environmental rules. These frameworks can be changed. What would alternatives look like? Imagination is required. If the current system produces these outcomes, what different structures might produce different results? This framework applies beyond Mar-a-Lago. Use it to examine Amazon warehouses, Wall Street banks, Silicon Valley campuses, or any institution where power and money concentrate. The questions remain the same. The answers reveal whether the system operates justly or extracts value from workers to benefit owners. Changes are possible. Start with the legal loopholes Trump exploited. No president should profit from official government functions. Strengthen emoluments clause enforcement. Require divestment or blind trusts. Create civil and criminal penalties for violations. Close the gap between legal and ethical by making the ethical requirements legally binding. Require security clearances for all staff at any presidential property used for official business. If classified information might be present, everyone with access must be vetted. This is basic security hygiene that should never have been optional. Reform flood insurance subsidies. Property owners in vulnerable coastal areas should pay actuarial rates that reflect true risk. Taxpayers across the country should not subsidize luxury estates in flood zones. Let market forces encourage building in sustainable locations rather than socializing the costs of defending unsustainable ones. Mandate living wages for service workers. $15 per hour is not enough in Palm Beach County. $25 reflects the actual cost of stability. Require health care benefits for all full-time workers. End the practice of keeping workers at part-time hours to avoid providing benefits. These changes face political opposition, but they are economically feasible. The wealth exists. The question is distribution. Cultural shifts must accompany legal reforms. Stop romanticizing Gilded Age excess. The mansions were beautiful. They were also monuments to exploitation. We can acknowledge the architectural achievement while condemning the labor practices that made construction possible. Teach both truths. Center workers in historical narratives. Every building has two stories. One about the vision and wealth of the person who commissioned it, another about the hands that made the vision real. Tell both. Name the workers. Honor their contribution. Question wealth accumulation itself. At what point does personal fortune become a societal problem? When one person controls resources that could house thousands, educate tens of thousands, or provide health care to hundreds of thousands, has accumulation gone too far? These are questions democracies must ask. Recognize environmental limits. Infinite growth on a finite planet is impossible. Building in vulnerable locations and expecting rescue when nature responds is not sustainable. Plan for managed retreat from coastlines. Accept that some development was a mistake and should not be defended indefinitely. Individual actions matter within this larger context. Support investigative journalism. Organizations that file FOIA requests, analyze court documents, and interview workers make this accountability possible. Subscribe to outlets doing this work. Vote for candidates committed to structural reforms. Campaign finance, labor rights, environmental protection, and tax justice all connect to the patterns visible at Mar-a-Lago. Vote as if these issues matter, because they do. Challenge narratives that erase workers. When historical accounts lionize wealthy visionaries while ignoring laborers, push back, add context, tell complete stories. Demand accountability from all leaders, regardless of party. Trump's conduct at Mar-a-Lago was legal because enforcement mechanisms failed. Future leaders will exploit the same loopholes unless citizens demand reforms. Resist simple villain stories while maintaining moral clarity. Marjorie Post faced real gender barriers in business. She also paid workers poverty wages while spending lavishly on imported luxuries. Both facts are true. Trump broke discriminatory barriers at Palm Beach clubs. He also used the presidency to profit from his properties. Both facts are true. Workers build beautiful things and contribute skilled labor. They also deserve compensation that reflects their value. All of these statements can coexist. Holding multiple truths simultaneously is harder than picking a side and defending it absolutely. But both-and thinking is more honest. It resists propaganda from all directions. It insists on complexity and context. Mar-a-Lago will eventually be underwater. Climate projections are clear. Sea level rise will make the property undefendable within decades. Climate change is the great equalizer. It does not care about property values, political connections, or legal arguments. The ocean will reclaim the island. Before that happens, decisions will be made. Who bears the costs of protection? Should taxpayers fund seawalls and beach renourishment for a private club? What gets preserved? Should artifacts be salvaged, or should everything return to the sea? Who gets compensated? Will owners demand buyouts at market prices or accept losses as consequences of building in vulnerable locations? These decisions will reveal what we actually value. Do we protect private wealth at public expense or require wealthy owners to bear their own risks? Do we preserve monuments to inequality or let nature reclaim them? Do we learn from the past or repeat the same mistakes in new locations? The choices are ours. They have not been made yet. The building is a mirror. It reflects what we choose to see and what we choose to ignore. Look at Mar-a-Lago and see beauty. The architecture is genuinely impressive. Skilled craftsmen created something visually striking. That beauty is real. Look at Mar-a-Lago and see exploitation. Workers earned survival wages while owners accumulated millions. That exploitation is real. Look at Mar-a-Lago and see corruption. A president profited from official functions while taxpayers covered security costs. That corruption is real. Look at Mar-a-Lago and see vulnerability. Rising seas will eventually swallow the property despite its grandeur. That vulnerability is real. All of these reflections exist in the same mirror. The question is which ones we acknowledge and which ones we turn away from. Acknowledgement requires action. Turning away permits continuation. The story is not over. The mansion still stands. Workers still clean the ballrooms and trim the hedges. Members still pay for access. Lawyers still file motions, and judges still grant delays. The ocean still rises, patient and inevitable. The choices are not made. That means they are still ours to make. And maybe, finally, we will learn the names of everyone who built it. The 600 workers who poured concrete and carved stone in the 1920s. The 150 workers who maintain the property today. Their names matter as much as the owners' names. Their labor created everything. Their contribution deserves recognition. When historians write the final chapter of Mar-a-Lago, whether that happens in 50 years or 500, those names should appear. not as footnotes, not as anonymous labor, but as the people whose hands shaped the building and whose work made everything possible. That recognition, that simple acknowledgement of human contribution would be a start, just a start, but a necessary one. You have reached the end of this investigation into Mar-a-Lago. The mansion still stands, the workers remain unnamed, and the patterns continue. If this analysis changed how you see American wealth and power, subscribe to this channel. More investigations into historic estates are coming, properties where beauty and exploitation sit side by side, where the architecture tells one story and the labor tells another. Leave a comment below. Have you visited Mar-a-Lago? Would you, knowing what you know now? The question reveals more than the answer.